When Olivia told her husband she was pregnant, she expected shock, maybe fear, maybe even tears instead. Liam looked at her and said 5 words that shattered everything that baby is in mine. Within hours, he had thrown her out, drained their joint account, and left her sleeping in a car with no money, no home, and no idea why he had turned so cruel. But Liam made one mistake. He thought fear would keep her silent. What he didn't know was that every transfer, every lie, and every threat was about to become evidence.
Husband's first words when I told him I was pregnant were that baby isn't mine. Then he kicked me out. I was sleeping in my car when a lawyer called, "Ma'am, your first husband from a decade ago has passed away. He left you his entire fortune, 8 million, but there's a condition." Hello everyone, it's Diana, and welcome back. Please subscribe to my channel and give this video a like. And tell me in the comments what city you re-listening from. I love seeing how far my stories travel. People say you can feel a marriage ending. They say it's a chill in the air, a silence that hangs over the dinner table, the way he doesn't reach for your hand when you re-driving anymore. But when you in love, you find reasons for the silence. You call it stress from work. You call it exhaustion. You say it's just a phase. I called it all of those things, and it nearly cost me everything. And yet somehow it gave me back more than I could have imagined. My name is Olivia Hayes, and I was married to Liam Hayes for 6 years. We lived in a townhouse in a manicured suburb of Chicago. The kind of place with perfect lawns and neighbours who watch you from behind their curtains. I was a freelance graphic designer. Liam's was a financial analyst. On paper, we were the perfect couple, more than perfect. Ones people watched at barbecues, whispering, they have it all. But paper can't tell you the whole story. Looking back, the first sign something was wrong appeared about a year before it all blew up. Liam's started spending hours in the attic. I found him up there one afternoon, going through my old college art projects. His back was to me, his focus intense. He saw me and slammed a sketchbook shut, smiling. He said he was just looking for some old tax returns. It was a work thing, he said, and kissed me. And like a fool, I believed him. Then came the money. Liam had always managed our finances. He was the analyst, after all. I trusted him completely. But then he started optimizing our assets, moving all my freelance income into new accounts he managed, showing me complicated spreadsheets that made my head spin. It was for our future, he insisted. At the same time, he began asking questions about my past, specifically about Ethan, that biotech genius from your college days. Hesitate. Whatever happened to him? Ethan Vance was my first husband. We married young. I was 23, he was 25, and we divorced 3 years later. It was messy, just a quiet understanding that we had become 2 different people. There were no kids, no drama. He moved to Austin, founded a biotech company, and we simply fell out of touch. I hadn't heard from Ethan in nearly a decade, so when Liam started asking about him, what was the name of that company your ex started? I wrote it off as simple curiosity, but he kept asking 3 or 4 times over 2 months. Each time it was a different question. I thought he was just being jealous. I thought he was feeling insecure. I told myself we'd talk about it later and tried to move on. I was 9 weeks pregnant when my world fell apart. I'd taken 2 tests at home before my doctor confirmed it. I was thrilled and nervous. All at once, we hadn't been planning it, but we hadn't been avoiding it either. I foolishly assumed Liam and I were both ready to start our family. I got home that night with a small gift box, a onesie inside that said future artist and the ultrasound photo. I remember every single detail of what happened next. Liam opened the box. He saw the onesie. He looked at the picture. Then he set them down on the counter with the slow, precise motion of a man would already made a decision. And he looked at me with cold, flat, empty eyes and spoke the 5 words I'll hear in my nightmares forever. "That is not my child," I laughed. I actually let out a short, sharp laugh because it had to be a joke. A sick, terrible joke. But his face was made of stone. He said it again. He claimed I'd been cheating on him for months. He told me to get out of his house that night. When I tried to talk, to touch his arm, he recoiled like I was diseased. By 10 p.m., I was sitting in my car in a Target parking lot 5 miles away, the unopened gift on the seat beside me, wondering how my entire life had just been demolished. I sat there for hours in the dark, asking myself the same question over and over. What kind of man, after 6 years of a happy marriage, learns his wife is pregnant and reacts with total certainty that the baby is not his? I didn't have the answer then, but a cold, small part of me was already searching for it. I slept in my car that night. It wasn't like in the movies. Crying in the back seat under a blanket, I just sat in the driver's seat with the heater on full blast, because it was February in Chicago, and that kind of cold hurts. I was too stunned to even cry for a long time. Just sat there. The store was still open. I watched people pushing carts, loading groceries, their kids complaining about bedtime. A normal Tuesday night, happening just feet away from me, but on a different planet. By midnight, I'd done the math. I had about $400 in my personal account. Everything else I'd earned had gone into the joint accounts Liam had set up. My work computer was in that house. My client files, my design software, my entire portfolio was on a hard drive on my desk. My health insurance was through Liam's company because the coverage was better. I was 9 weeks pregnant with no health insurance, no savings I could get to, and no key to my own home. And then I realised I was also sitting on information. Liam was betting I'd never figure out. The thought came quietly, but with perfect clarity. Ethan Vance, my first husband. Liam had been asking about him for 2 months. Why? Liam wasn't a jealous man, he was an analyst. He didn't run on emotion, he ran on data. He built a career finding value where other people didn't see it. So, if Liam was asking about Ethan, it wasn't because he felt threatened. It was because he had found something out about Ethan that I didn't know. And the only thing worth researching about an ex-spouse you haven't seen in a decade is money. I pulled out my phone and searched for Ethan Vance's name, his biotech company. The one he'd started in Austin had been acquired 3 years ago by a massive pharmaceutical firm. The sale price wasn't public, but I recognized the buyer, and they didn't make small purchases. After the sale, every one of his online profiles went silent. It was like he had vanished. Deliberately, I stared at the phone in the dark car. Did Liam know that I didn't? And how long had he known it? I didn't sleep at all. Around 5 a.m. I drove to a 24-hour diner on Lincoln Avenue and ordered coffee and toast I couldn't eat. I sat in a booth and thought. By the time the morning regulars started shuffling in, I had the bones of a plan. First, I had to get back into that house and get my things. My passport, social security card, my iMac, and the backup drive with my life's work. They belonged to me. Liam couldn't legally keep them from me, but I knew he would try to. Second, I needed legal help before I did another thing. Not a divorce lawyer, not yet. I needed someone to tell me my rights regarding our finances. And if Liam could legally change the locks on a townhouse that was in both our names, I suspected he couldn't. I needed to be certain. Third, I had to see a doctor. I was 9 weeks pregnant and without insurance. I needed answers fast. And fourth, the part that felt both terrifying and critical, I had to find out what Liam knew about Ethan Caldwell. Because if Liam had been digging into my ex-husband's finances, then his accusation wasn't a moment of anger. It was a strategy. Why would a man make up a reason to throw his pregnant wife out on the street? The answer was ugly, but it made perfect sense. Because he wanted his wife gone before an event occurred that would give her a claim to something he wanted for himself. I wrapped my hands around the cold coffee mug. I wasn't a stupid woman. I had built a career on seeing the underlying grid in a chaotic design, and I could see the grid here, too, Dottermold. Liam saw a financial storm coming, something tied to Mark, and he tried to push me out of the boat before it hit. The baby just made him move faster. That was it. But he made one huge mistake. He did it all too quickly, too clumsily. A man with a real plan doesn't just change the locks and leave a cold note on the counter. He panicked, and panic always leaves a trail. I left a $5 bill on the cafe table, pulled on my jacket, and stepped into the bitter Chicago wind, feeling something totally unexpected. Grounded. Not happy, not even safe, but grounded. Like a skyscraper when its footings finally hit bedrock. I finally knew where I was standing. Knew which walls were solid, and which were just for show. I sat in my car, scrolled through my contacts, and found Eleanor Vance's number. A divorce lawyer. I'd met at a few women business luncheons. I had her cell because she'd hired my design firm for a rebranding project last year. It was barely 7 a.m. I texted her anyway. Eleanor, it's Chloe Peterson. I need to see you as soon as possible. Urgent family issue. Sorry for the early text. Her reply buzzed back 12 minutes later. I can move my 9 o'clock. Be here at 8:45. I let out a long breath. The strategy was just a blueprint, but a blank canvas is where every new design begins. Eleanor Vance's firm was in the Loop, on the 22nd floor of a tower. Heidi walked by 1,000 times but never entered. Her paralegal met me downstairs at 8:40 and led me to a corner conference room that smelled of strong coffee and quiet confidence. I was wearing clothes from yesterday. I hadn't showered. I ducked into a Walgreens for a cheap toothbrush and a new t-shirt, the best I could do. Eleanor walked in at 8:45 on the dot, placed a fresh legal pad on the glass table, and met my gaze with the calm, steady look of someone who had seen it all. "Tell me everything," she said. "Start at the beginning. Don't leave anything out." And so I told her. Wrote on her pad, never once interrupting me. When I finally stopped talking, 20 minutes later, she put down her pen. "Let's handle the immediate problems first," she said. "The condo is in both your names, correct?" It was. Then he cannot legally bar you from entry. If Hes changed the codes, that's an illegal eviction. We can file an emergency motion. Second, your joint savings. Has he touched it since last night? I had no idea. "Check now," she instructed, sliding her own phone toward me. I logged into our bank's app. The balance was $112. On Monday, it had held over 45,000. I placed the phone back on the table. My hand was perfectly steady, which felt strange. "He moved it all last night," I said. Eleanor's face remained neutral, but her pen started moving again. "Look for the transfer timestamps." I did. 3 separate transfers, all between 10:15 and 10:40 p.m. About an hour after he'd told me to leave, they went to an account number I had never seen before. "That's dissipation of marital assets," Eleanor said, writing. "It gives us solid grounds to..." petition for an immediate freeze on all his accounts. How long have you been married? 6 years. And you've lived in Illinois the entire time? Yes. Good. This is an equitable distribution state. He can't just drain the account and call it his. I looked up. Now tell me about your first husband. I told her about Mark, the little I knew, and what I'd started to piece together. She listened, her focus intense. So you believe your current husband found information about your ex-husband's financial situation and moved to cut you out before some event and inheritance. A payout could happen. She laid it out so plainly. I think it's possible, I said. It's more than possible, she corrected. It's a clear motive, and if we can prove it, it completely reframes this divorce case. She leaned back in her chair. After you leave, I want you to call the Chicago Bar Association. Ask for a referral to an estate lawyer who specializes in inheritance litigation. You need to find out if Mark Peterson had any legal instrument naming you a will, a trust, anything. You can't just ask for it, but an estate attorney will know the right channels to go through. I nodded, my own pen flying, and Chloe, document everything, every text message, every call, save every bank statement you have access to. Screenshot them and email them to an address Liam doesn't know about. Do you have an old account he can't access? I did, a personal one from before we were married that he never knew existed. Use that one exclusively, she said. Starting right now, I left Elena's office at 10 a.m. with a client folder, a clear to-do list, and a sense of purpose. Direction. The Chicago morning was brilliant and cold. The kind of winter light that makes problems seem smaller than they are. I sat in my car in the parking garage and started working. I emailed the bank screenshots to my old secret account. I took pictures of the transfer details. I drafted a message to our bank's fraud department, reporting the unauthorized withdrawals and requesting a hold, using the exact legal phrasing Eleanor had provided. Then I had to find Mark's family. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered his sister Sarah, who had always been warm to me. Found her on LinkedIn, same name, same kind face, just older. I sent her a message explaining I was Chloe, Mark's ex-wife, and that I had an urgent reason to ask about his estate. I apologized for the awkwardness of it all. I told her I hoped she was doing well. She called me back in under an hour. Her voice was strained. Chloe, Mark died in October. It was a heart attack. He was only 48. She paused. His lawyers, they've been trying to find you for months. How did you not know? I explained that my life had recently been turned upside down. She was quiet for a moment. He never got remarried, she said softly. He still talked about you, even at the end. Said, you were the only one who ever saw him for who he was. Another beat of silence. His estate attorney is David Chen. He's based in Seattle. Chloe, you really need to call him. I just sat there in that concrete garage long after we hung up. Mark was gone. He'd been gone for 4 months, and his lawyers were looking for me. Suddenly, the entire picture snapped into focus. The strange questions about Mark, the sudden fight, the money disappearing from our account. The moment I was gone, Liam hadn't just suspected something. Liam knew. He found out about Mark's death months ago, from a trade journal, an old friend, a simple online search. Spent those months waiting and planning, and the second I told him, I was pregnant, complicating his clean exit. He pulled the trigger. That was the real betrayal. Not the lies, he shouted. Not the shock in the diner. It was right here in this garage, when I realized my husband had systematically tried to ruin me over money I didn't even know existed. I looked up David Chen's firm in Seattle and dialed the number. His assistant put me through after a 4-minute hold. When he answered, his voice was professional, cautious, and unmistakably relieved. "Mrs. Person," he said, "I am so glad you called. We have a matter of significant importance regarding the estate of Mark Peterson. You are a primary beneficiary." "How significant?" I asked, my voice flat. $54 million, he replied. "But there's a specific condition attached." $54 million. I stared at the painted numbers on the pillar in front of me. Level 4. The universe was giving me something solid to focus on, while my entire world dissolved and reformed around me. David Chen laid out the condition. Mark had put his assets into a revocable trust stock from his company's sale, property, investment portfolios. The condition for me to inherit was simple. Really, I had to appear in person at their Seattle law office within 60 days of being formally notified to sign the paperwork and confirm my identity. It explained that Mark had always been private and careful. He put that clause in to stop exactly this kind of mess, to prevent false claims that follow large estates. He wanted me, the real me, to physically show up, trusting that an imposter wouldn't go to the trouble. He amended the trust 9 months before he passed, David said. "You were always in it, but this final version substantially increased your share after his startup was acquired." "Was the trust's existence public knowledge?" I asked. There was a slight hesitation. The existence of a trust can sometimes be found through certain corporate or real estate filings. Specific terms weren't public, but someone with money and motivation could have discovered the trust's existence. Mr. Klein paused again. "Is there a reason?" "You're asking?" "Yes," I said. "There is." I told him everything about Mark, about the timing, about the money he moved from our joint account the night he threw me out. Mr. Klein was quiet through all of it. When I finished, he said, "Mrs. Sterling, I strongly advise you to have your attorney ensure that any inheritance is classified as separate property and placed in an account your husband cannot legally touch. Since you're still married, the legal framework is critical." "Where?" I said. "I was with my lawyer this morning." "Good," he said. "Come to Chicago as soon as you can." I flew to Chicago 4 days later. My lawyer, Sarah, had already gotten the joint account frozen by a judge, and she had sent a formal letter to Mark's attorney establishing my right to enter our condo and retrieve my belongings. A police officer came with me when I went back. Mark was home. He just stood in the doorway to the living room and watched me pack my things with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Not rage, not pity, but the cold, calculating blankness of a man doing math in his head. He didn't say a word. His mother, Evelyn, was also there, sitting on the sofa with her hands folded, her eyes tracking every item I took. Evelyn Sterling was 71 years old, petite, with silver hair styled in a perfect bob. She had the warm, grandmotherly manner of someone who uses warmth like a hunter uses a lure. She had never liked me. I knew that from the first holiday we spent together, but she never showed it directly. She showed it in tiny adjustments. The way she'd ask about my design work, with just a little too much surprise in her voice. The way she'd always back up Mark's version of our shared stories. She was, I had long suspected, the engine behind most of Mark's ambition. He wasn't a dumb man, but he was a man who needed a woman to sharpen his focus, and Evelyn had been doing that his entire life. As I carried my last box out the door, she spoke for the first time. "Making a terrible mistake, Amelia," she said pleasantly. as if offering me a slice of cake. I picked up the box and didn't look back. I signed the documents in Chicago on a Thursday, Mr. Klein's office took up the top 2 floors of a skyscraper in the Loop, with huge windows overlooking the city. His paralegal offered me water with the kind of careful, professional kindness people show when they know the kind of money involved. The process took 4 hours. Identity checks, document reviews, legal proof of my marital status. Mr. Klein walked me through every single page. The funds would be disbursed in stages. An initial payment of around $7 million within 30 days, with the rest to follow over 18 months, as various assets were carefully liquidated. Back to Boston on Friday night. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A man's voice, measured, a little too casual, said, "Amelia. This is a friend of Mark's. I just wanted to give you a courtesy call." People who do what you're doing sometimes find that things get messy for them. Professionally, socially. You're a brand strategist. A reputation is a delicate thing. Licenses can be reviewed. There was a pause. It might be smart to think about whether this is really the hill you want to die on. I stood in the kitchen of my friend's apartment where I was staying. My colleague Chloe had given me her spare room, and I held the phone to my ear and thought about how terrified I was supposed to be feeling. "Going to record this call," I said. "Tell me your name." The line went dead. I called Sarah. Then I called Mr. Klein. They both confirmed the same thing. A threat against my professional license, made by phone by an unknown person, but clearly at the direction of my husband during active litigation, was a massive legal liability for Mark. I had received it on my cell phone. The metadata was automatically logged. Sarah filed a harassment motion by Monday afternoon. Mark's lawyer called Sarah on Tuesday, asking to discuss a more constructive path forward. Sarah called me afterward. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Didn't expect you to have serious legal counsel already lined up," she said. "They expected you to be scrambling." "I know," I said. "They're going to try something else," she said. "Rest for a few days. Eat, sleep. You're going to need to be steady for what's next." So I did. I spent 3 days doing next to nothing. I walked along the Charles River in the mornings, bought food from a deli near Chloe's apartment, and read a novel I'd been meaning to start for 2 years. I let my body do the quiet work of growing the person inside it. My first OB appointment at a new practice, set up under my own insurance plan that Sarah helped me arrange, was on Wednesday. Wrong heartbeat. Everything right where it should be. I sat in the car afterward in the clinic parking lot and felt, for the first time in 2 weeks, something close to peace. It didn't last long, but it was real. Their next move came on a Thursday, 10 days after the harassment motion was filed. Mark's attorney, a man named Stuart Pell, whom I'd never met, but whose name was on every document Sarah had received, sent a formal letter proposing mediation. Attached to it, and I knew immediately it was no coincidence, was a financial settlement offer. Mark would agree not to contest the divorce, would waive any claim on the frozen joint account, and would, the letter used the word generously, agree to forego any challenge to my separate property designation of the Chicago inheritance. In exchange, I would drop the harassment motion, accept a reduced share of our marital assets, and sign a non-disclosure agreement preventing me from discussing the details of our separation with anyone. I read it twice. Then I called Sarah. "He's trying to buy your silence," she said immediately. "The Inder is the tell. He doesn't care about the money. He cares about what you know and what you might say about him. About him. Tracking my grandfather's estate before kicking me out, I said. Exactly. That's a pattern of conduct that, if it became part of the public divorce record, would be professionally and socially devastating for him. In venture capital, reputation matters. She paused. The offers is also financially terrible for you. Your share of marital assets under Massachusetts law, given the length of the marriage and his draining of the joint account, would almost certainly be more than what they're offering. So, we decline, I said. We decline, she confirmed. And we do it without a counteroffer, which sends a message that you're not looking for a quick deal. You're looking for a full accounting. That was what we did. I won't pretend I wasn't moved by the offer. There is a version of yourself, tired, pregnant, living in a friend's spare room, scared about the future, who looks at a number on a page and thinks, what if this is enough? What if you just took it, signed the paper, and started over somewhere quiet? I sat with that version of myself for about 40 minutes. One afternoon on Clello's couch, with a cup of tea, while the Boston rain came down against the window. And then I put her away, because the offer wasn't about helping me. It was about protecting Mark, and more specifically, I suspected about protecting Evelyn, because someone had spent months researching my grandfather's estate. And Mark, for all his calculated moves, was not a man who did that kind of patient work alone. He managed portfolios, he negotiated deals, sustained quiet research into the financial life of his wife's family, done over months without raising my suspicion. That required someone Mark trusted, someone with time and motivation and nothing to lose. His mother had been the one sitting at the kitchen table when I came to get my things. His mother, with her folded hands and her watchful eyes. I called my Aunt Catherine, my grandfather's daughter, and asked her one careful question. Had anyone contacted her, or anyone else in the family, in the months after my grandfather's death, asking questions about his will or about me? Catherine was quiet for a moment. A woman called, she said finally, about 2 months after Dad died. She said she was a journalist writing about literary estates. She asked if he had left any significant bequests. I didn't think much of it. I told her. I didn't know the specifics. A pause. She had a Boston area code. That was enough. Chloe has been my friend since grad school. We met in a design theory seminar and discovered we had the exact same opinions about bad coffee and good architecture. She is practical, funny, and has the kind of loyalty that doesn't show up in speeches, but in actions. She had handed me her spare key within 12 hours of me calling her, no questions asked. And she had said very simply, stay as long as you need. That evening, she came home from work and found me at the kitchen table with papers spread all around me. She made pasta. She poured wine for herself and water for me. She sat down and said, tell me where you are. I told her all of it. The inheritance, the offer, the threatening phone call, and Catherine's information about the woman who'd called, asking about the will. Sarah just listened, her eyes locked on my face, not interrupting once. When I was done, she took a beat. So his mother knew about the inheritance before Liam threw you out, she said. I'm pretty sure. The plan was to ditch you before the will was settled, so you'd have no claim, except you were already in the will directly, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. I know, I said. I think they really miscalculated. They must have assumed Arthur left me a small gift, or that everything would just go to his family. I don't think they had any idea how much it was. So they panicked, Sarah said. I think so. I got pregnant, which threw a wrench in their neat little timeline, and Liam made a move that was fast, but definitely not smart. Sarah scooped up a bite of pasta. So what do you need? I might need a witness, I said. Someone who can testify about the state I was in when I showed up here. The timing of it all is crucial for the case. Done, she said, just like that. I looked at her from across the table. Outside, the rain had eased into a light mist. Charlotte has this soft, amber glow at night, a light that's kind to exhausted people. I'd been running on empty for 3 weeks, and I noticed that kindness even from streetlights. Thank you, I said. Just waved it away. Don't thank me yet. Somewhere in a big house north of the city, Liam and his mother Eleanor were watching me. I could feel it. And I knew their next play wasn't going to be a letter from a lawyer. I was right. They came on a Sunday, but not together. Eleanor came first alone, which I should have recognised as a setup right away. She called Sarah's phone, a number I never gave her, so Liam must have dug it up. She called at 10 in the morning, asking if she could just come by to talk. She used the word please, which she had never once said to me. I thought about it for a minute. Then I said yes. Saying no gave me nothing. Saying yes, that could give me information. Showed up at 11 with a little tin of homemade cookies. It was so perfectly calculated to make her seem harmless. It was almost impressive. She sat in Sarah's living room, turned down my offer of tea, and scanned the apartment with that look people get when they're taking inventory without trying to look like it. I want to apologise, she started for Liam, for how this all went down. I just sat there, saying nothing. He panicked. She went on. He has been under so much pressure with his firm, and when you told him about the baby, he reacted poorly. He knows it. He's completely heartbroken. She clasped her hands in her lap. Oh, it doesn't have to be this way. You two built a life together. 6 years, and now a baby is coming. She let that hang in the air. A baby needs his father, a real family. Think about what you're doing to this child, fighting this legal battle the way you are. And there it was. The shot, fired clean and quiet, aimed right where she intended. And the inheritance, I said, a tiny pause. So fast I would have missed it if I wasn't watching for it. That's a private family situation, she said, smooth as ice. It has nothing to do with your marriage, Eleanor, I said. Who called Arthur Vance's sister, pretending to be a family friend? Something flickered across her face. It was fast, controlled, and gone in an instant. I have no idea what you are talking about. I think you do, she reset herself. The warmth came back, perfectly adjusted. Chloe, I am asking you, as the grandmother of your unborn child, to please stop and think about what you are destroying. Liam is ready to start fresh. He's willing to do couples counselling to earn back your trust. All asking is that you let this other business go. It's affecting his professional relationships. It's about perception. He wants me to drop the lawsuit, I said, and sign an ender. He wants his wife back, she insisted. I stared at her for a long moment. 71 years old, perfect silver hair, a tin of cookies on the coffee table. Was a woman who'd spent a lifetime knowing that charm was a tool, that patience was a weapon, that the best way to win was to always be the most reasonable person in the room. Eleanor, I said, I know about the money transfers. I know you researched Arthur's entire estate, and I know about the call you made to his sister. My lawyer knows about that call too. A judge has already granted a motion, confirming that Liam was hiding marital assets from me. I stood up. Tell Liam the answer is no. Tell him it was always no. And tell him if anyone from his side contacts my friends, my lawyer, or my doctor again, we will file for harassment before the week is out. Eleanor's warmth vanished. It didn't just fade. It switched off like a TV screen going dark. The face underneath was cold, sharp, dry, and calculating. You're making a powerful enemy, she said. I already have one, I told her. I just prefer to know exactly who I'm fighting. She stood, picked up her cookies, and walked to the door, and just before she left, she turned and said something I didn't see coming. This isn't a threat, it's a promise, she said, her voice completely flat. You have no idea who you're up against. Then she was gone. I stood in Sarah's living room and noticed my hands were shaking. It wasn't just fear. It was the physical price your body pays for holding it all together. Your system finally lets go of what your face couldn't show. I was scared. It would be a lie to say I wasn't Eleanor. Harper wasn't the type to make empty threats. She had money, connections, and 6 decades of practice in manipulation. She raised Liam, which means she's an expert at finding your weak spots and pressing down hard. But I noticed something else. The fear wasn't making me want to run. It was making me want to finish this fight. I thought of something my dad told me as a kid. He was an engineer, a very practical man, and he said, Chloe, the only buildings that ever collapse are the ones that weren't designed to hold the actual weight. He was talking about structures, but I finally understood what he really meant. I had been built to carry a lot more than Liam or Eleanor ever planned for. I called Jenna and told her about Eleanor's visit. I'd recorded the whole thing on my phone. North Carolina is on a party consent state. Jenna listened to the audio and said very quietly, "Perfect." I called my financial advisor next. He confirmed the first wire from Arthur's estate had cleared and would be in my account by the end of the week. Then I sat down with my little notebook, where I kept a log of everything, and wrote at the top of a new page, "They are afraid." Fear is useful, and I underlined it twice. Deposition was set for a Tuesday in March. Jenna had filed for discovery 3 weeks before, demanding financial statements, emails, texts, everything going back 24 months. Liam's lawyer fought nearly every single request, and the judge shot down almost every objection. The documents painted a clear picture, though by then, nothing could really surprise me. Liam had first searched Arthur Vance's name back in April of last year. The search was logged on his personal cloud account, which his lawyer had tried and failed to keep out of evidence. He'd visited a financial news site covering the sale of Arthur's company, Arthur's professional profile, and the website for a Seattle law firm that specialized in the exact kind of trust Arthur had. Jenna's phone records, which Jenna had to fight for 2 weeks to get, showed a 17-minute call to Arthur's sister in November, 4 months after he died. That was the call his sister told me about. Those same records showed 11 calls between Eleanor and Liam in the 72 hours before he kicked me out of our house. And then there was the text message, sent from Liam's personal phone to his mother's, where he wrote that he needed the Chloe situation handled before the lawyers from Seattle could reach her. The text was sent the Thursday before he threw me out. He had known for days. He had planned the whole thing. The deposition was in Jenna's conference room, the same one where Shed first slid her phone across the table, telling me to check our joint bank account. 4 months ago. Everything had changed. Liam sat across from me for the first time since that night. He was in a grey suit, with the stiff, rehearsed look of a man who'd been coached for hours on what to say. The first 40 minutes were just procedure. Liam gave his measured, prepared answers, using the phrase, "I don't recall so often, it was practically a tick." Then Jenna got to the text message. She put it up on the large conference room screen and just let it hang there, like a poker player laying down a winning card. Liam looked at it. I saw a tiny shift in his shoulders. Almost nothing, but I spent 6 years learning to read his body. "Mr. Harper, do you recognise this message? It appears to be from my phone. Did you write it? I may have. The text message says you need the Chloe situation handled." "What situation was that?" his lawyer objected. Jenna rephrased. Liam said he couldn't recall. "Mr. Harper, prior to October 14th, were you aware that your wife was a beneficiary in Arthur Vance's will?" The silence stretched for 4 seconds. I counted everyone. "A yes or a no, Mr. Hayes?" Liam's lawyer, an old family friend, put a hand on his arm. Liam said nothing, advising my client to decline to answer. The lawyer began, but Ms. Davies cut him off. "On what grounds?" "He's already testified. He had no other financial entanglements." She said it with the calm precision of a surgeon. The refusal to answer is noted. Liam looked at his lawyer, and I saw it happen. A silent, frantic conversation. And I watched the moment Liam understood that the elaborate facade he'd built had just failed. It didn't crash. It just settled. No, the way a building settles when a load-bearing lie gives way. First a crack, then a groan. He finally looked at me, searching for something. I'd always wondered what I would feel in this moment. Vengeance, heartbreak, a bitter cocktail of both. But all I felt was the quiet, solid calm of someone who designed the building herself and knows exactly which walls will stand no matter what. I held his gaze and didn't say a word. He was the first to look away in the elevator. Mrs. Davies said, "He'll settle fast." "I know," I said. The doors opened onto the bright May afternoon. That particular light that makes Austin feel like summer has already arrived. Davies turned to me. "How are you, Chloe?" I took a moment to answer honestly. My feet were swollen. I was exhausted. I missed the idea of a home, but for the first time in months, a feeling I hadn't expected washed over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm actually okay." Liam settled 8 days later. He had no other move. The agreement was 30 pages long. He relinquished all claim to my grandfather's inheritance, acknowledged it as my sole property, and repaid the $150,000 he'd funneled to her. I got the house we were building, the majority of our shared investments, and the NDA he'd tried to bully me with. It was gone. Signed absolutely nothing that would silence me. A prenatal DNA test had already confirmed paternity at 12 weeks. Liam was the father. That painful fact was entered into the final record. Proof in black and white that his accusations were just another lie. I really hope he read that page. The first settlement payment landed on a Wednesday. I was in my friend of his kitchen when the bank alert hit my phone. I just stared at the number, unable to move. I texted her it's here. Her reply was immediate. 3 confetti emojis and my name, Chloe. I called my grandfather's old business partner and just said, "It's done." It was quiet for a long second. "Your grandpa would be proud," he said. He really would. Liam signed the last of the divorce papers on a Tuesday. He didn't even glance in my direction. The marriage was officially over. Driving home through the traffic on the expressway, my daughter moved inside me for the first time. It was a tiny, definite flutter, like a secret knock on a door I'm here. she was saying, in that language only mothers understand. I know, I answered back, so am I. Her name is Maya. She was born on a Friday in August. 6 pounds, 9 ounces, with her father's dark, serious eyes and, everyone says, my stubborn chin. I live in a little bungalow I bought in South Austin. It has way more sunlight than the old house, with a backyard slowly figuring out. My own architectural firm has 5 clients now. My name is on the blueprints. That means something I can't quite put into words. My grandfather's inheritance made this new life possible. I won't pretend it didn't, but I've tried hard not to let it change who I am. I still double-check every measurement. I still call my mom every Sunday. Liam's startup lost its biggest investor the month after the divorce. He had to sell off a lot of his stock. He sees Maya every other weekend, without much drama. He is her father. Whatever he did to me, that fact remains. On the days I'm still angry. I try, and mostly fail to keep those two truths separate. I haven't spoken to his sister Isabel since the day I found out she knew about her best friend all along. I don't see that changing. My best friend Ava got married last fall. I was her maid of honour, with Maya in a carrier, who screamed through the entire vow exchange. Ava will be teasing me about that for the next 50 years. My grandpa's old partner, Mr. Chen, came to visit. He brought old photographs of my grandfather that I'd never seen, and one of his old blueprints. He always said, "You were the most structurally honest person he knew," Mr. Chen told me. Stared at the faint blue lines of the drawing for a long time. I know, I said. I tried to be some mornings. I sit on my new porch swing and trace the path that brought me here. A late night in March, a credit card statement, a single damning charge for a lease on an apartment I'd never seen. It didn't feel like a story with a plot back then. It felt like standing inside a building as it was coming down around me, just trying to find a single wall that would hold. The walls held. When Maya is old enough, I'll tell her this whole story. Not as a warning, but as a demonstration. See, I'll tell her. See what's built to last. This whole mess taught me anything. It's this. The people who try to make you smaller are always betting on one thing that you don't know your own strength. Liam was betting on my fear. His sister was betting on my silence. They both bet wrong. Know your own blueprint. Document everything. Find your Ava. And never, ever sign your voice away. What would you have done? Seeing that charge on your screen? Let me know in the comments. I'd really love to hear from you. And if you think someone else needs to hear this story, please share it. Thanks for listening.